Welcome back to Brain Talk. This is part 3. My name is Len Branswitz. I'm a board-certified clinical nutritionist, a naturopathic physician, and part of the Ask the Pharmacist group. Let's review. If you haven't watched part 1 or part 2 of this series, I suggest you go back and listen to that. We're talking about the brain chemicals, the chemicals that modulate how our brain communicates with the body. Now, I just want to get you caught up a little bit. And again, as I'm sitting at my desk, I want to remind you the brain has 3 different pathways in order to communicate with the body. So in ideal terms, since we're talking about brain talk, we've been focusing this segment on the neurotransmitters. Let's remember, we also have 2 other pathways by which the brain can communicate with the body. And again, just by way of a sketch, we see that the brain can communicate through 3 different pathways. One being cortisol. That word became very synonymous back in the 90s and early 2000s as an evil entity. Cortisol, that stimulates your brainwave functioning. That if it was too high, you started to gain weight. Some truth to that. We're going to deal with cortisol in another segment. Your sex hormones. Yes, your sex hormones, your estrogens and your progestins, and in men, your testosterone, are also communication pathways. We're focusing on the neurotransmitter side, the brain chemicals. We talked in the first segment that these are amino acid based. They come from the protein that we consume. So step 1 in trying to manipulate your brain chemistry is to make sure that you're consuming sufficient protein. We talked about that in the first segment. Making sure that it's about 40% of your caloric intake. In segment 2, we talked about the different types of neurotransmitters. And again, in our body, we have 2 different types. We have ones that are very stimulatory. They are uppers. They are the ones that stimulate us to do and to move. We talked about that in segment 2. Today we're going to talk about the other side of the spectrum, the inhibitories, the ones that counterbalance that stimulation. So if we look at it like an old-fashioned teeter-totter, we have to keep our balance point. We don't want the stimulatories going up or the inhibitories going up. We want to try to keep a perfectly good balance. And that's the difficult thing when it comes to living in today's world. How are our brain chemicals? Well, the inhibitory side is where medicine has focused for a long time. Medicine recognized that one of the most important neurotransmitters, called serotonin, is inhibitory. It's one that slows you down. So we're going to go through 7 different neurotransmitters. I'll just mention them by name, and we will tell you what role they play. Now, in segment 4, soon to come, we'll talk about how you test for these and then how you make the corrections. So today we're talking about the inhibitory side, the side that brings us back down. Let's start out with one called GABA, G-A-B-A. For those of you that take a lot of supplements, I'm sure you've seen that in the stores. You'll see GABA supplements. Not very effective orally. Do help a bit. Again, inhibitory. Understanding that GABA is the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter from the neck up in the brain. It's necessary for us to feel calm and relaxed. If those go high, however, if GABA goes high, that's a typical look at hyperactivity, anxiousness, and major sleep issues. GABA, when it's elevated, is the one that makes us become a very light sleeper. We hear every noise. We hear the cat out in the hallway. We hear the wind blowing outside. We feel an exaggeration of pain in our shoulders. We have a very restless sleep. If GABA levels go low, we add the word uncontrolled to the scenario. Uncontrolled hyperactivity, uncontrolled anxiousness, uncontrolled sleep difficulties. So you notice at either end of the spectrum, high or low, GABA plays a crucial role. So it's very important to keep GABA levels proper. Glycine is number 2. Again, glycine is an inhibitory neurotransmitter that, like GABA, helps to calm and relax the body. It works from the neck down. So again, when glycine goes high, the same thing. Anxiousness, low mood, and an over-exaggeration of stress. Things appear to be much worse than they really are. When they go low, when glycine goes low, there's really no associated problem. So obviously we want to keep glycine on the low side. Next is serotonin, big number 1, the one that's been recognized. This is the one for which the development of the SSRIs, the Prozacs, the Lexapros, the Zolofts have been created to make sure that we have sufficient levels of serotonin. Remember, these drugs do not make more serotonin. They help you hold on to what you have. The analogy is I've got a hole in my gas tank and I'm using my serotonin, but I just don't have enough. So it's draining out. Serotonin reuptake inhibitors are like a patch on the gas tank so we can hold on to what we have. Part of the naturopathic approach is to help the body produce more. So when levels of serotonin go high, that doesn't normally occur in a human unless we're using a medication. When they go low, low mood, sleep difficulties, uncontrolled appetite, I'm hungry all the time, headaches become a major issue, migraines in particular, and then even an exaggeration of hot flashes, even if you're in your 30s or 40s and I start getting warm. The other inhibitory neurotransmitter, one that again has been recognized as a supplement by many, is called taurine. Taurine is important for proper heart function, healthy sleep, and promoting calmness. Now, when levels of taurine go high, hyperactivity, anxiousness, and sleep difficulties. When it goes low, we add the word uncontrolled again. The second inhibitory neurotransmitter that you notice, if we go high or low, all we do is add the word uncontrolled. It gets us into the point where we have major problems. A couple more odds and ends in this inhibitory side is one called 5-HIAA, 5-hydroxyindoleacetic acid. You don't need to know that. But when that goes high, that's a metabolite of serotonin. This is where we start to have these genetic issues. Mom and dad were depressed. I'm coming from a household that's depressed. I'm becoming depressed. Sister, brother, depressed. We seem to pass this down from generation to generation. This is where, in the old days, a medication called an MAO inhibitor was developed to try to help block this. But 5-HIAA, if it goes high, gives us major intestinal complaints. So again, when we test for these, and I have irritable bowel syndrome, it could be the neurological link. The neurotransmitter link could be off kilter on top of something that's structurally off kilter. Low levels of 5-HIAA, impulsivity, sleep difficulties, low mood, cravings, urges. So again, a very important factor to test for. Next is DOPAC, D-O-P-A-C. That's a metabolite of dopamine, that pleasure hormone. If it goes high, hyperactivity, focal issues, and developmental delay. And if it goes low, no big deal. So again, an important factor to check for. And lastly, glutamine. That's an amino acid which is made into GABA and glutamate. Optimal glutamine levels are important for intestinal function. High glutamine levels are thought to be an imbalance point. So let's review. GABA, glycine, serotonin, and taurine, your major 4 inhibitory neurotransmitters, followed by 5-HIAA, DOPAC, and glutamine. That is your 7 inhibitories. In this segment, we're talking about inhibition, being able to keep calm from this factor. So let's summarize what we've talked about so far. Up to this point in the series, we talked about the ability of the brain to communicate with the body. We're going to talk about cortisol in the next segment. The sex hormones become another important factor, as well as your neurotransmitters. So in summary again, we talked in segment 2 about the excitatory neurotransmitters and their role. In this segment, we talked about the inhibitory neurotransmitters and their role. It becomes very important to keep these in balance. I want you to stay tuned for the next segment. Click on the next segment because it becomes very important if we understand that there is new science that can tell us how to check for these, how to get the samples off to a lab to be able to give you an analysis of your brain chemistry. It cannot be used as a diagnostic tool. However, it can give you a good starting point to start to make some of the corrections. We'll talk about that in one of the upcoming segments also. Okay, Len, you're giving us all this data. How do you fix it? And that gets to be a really, really big issue. And to reach us, if something that I said got your attention and you want to be able to get in touch with us to set up a time to discuss your personal issues, you got to call us on our off-air line. We have set up a toll-free line where we can get your information. It's 877-275-7743. And again, the website is lenandjoe.com. We'll see you in segment 4.